Welcome to this evening's presentation on mysticism in the present moment. My name is Mark Mann. I'm the Director of Programs and Institutes here at the Catholic Information Center. And let me tell you a little bit about our ministry here. We create spaces for encounter, dialogue, and community at the intersection of faith and life. And the hope of our witness is that people of all walks of life will be able to experience the good news of God's reign with joy. We're a ministry of the Paulist Fathers in collaboration with the Diocese of Grand Rapids. I'm very happy to welcome Mr. Fred Johnson here this evening as our presenter. Fred, now retired, was the Director of Faith Formation for the Cathedral of Saint Andrew. 10 years?
10 years.
10 years. He continues to serve in a ministry as a procurator advocate in the annulment process and also leads a book study on Monday mornings, the book of which has been, you've been working on this book since March, April? Since March. It's pretty packed, but Fred has a really great presentation to share with all of you to give us an overview or an introduction to this contemplative practice. He and his wife Joyce have been longtime friends of the Catholic Information Center and now live in Rockford. Please help me welcome Mr. Fred Johnson.
Well, good evening to everyone. Some of you I know both online and here. A number of you I know here. And it's good to see old friends once more. It's been about 3.5 years since I've actually stood up here and done any teaching. So bear with me if I forget something. We'll see what happens, right?
But we also have some new features.
There you go. Yeah, this is a first too. So tonight I am previewing with you a book by Cardinal Mendonça. I was informed that we don't pronounce it Mendonca. The C with a little tail on it is pronounced with an S. So I have to tell you that this has been a most interesting book. This small group that I meet with on Monday mornings, you know, we've been meeting together since we figured out yesterday, 2014. So quite a few years. And here's this book, right? You can see how thick it is. Since March, right? We can only get through about 4 or 5 pages a week is what it amounts to. So I can't possibly hope to tell you about this entire book. And I would encourage you, if you elect to get it at some point in time, read it with someone else. Read it together with someone else. I think you'll find it to be a great dialogue book. So, so my goal is just to introduce you to the big picture of Mendonça's thoughts. And let me start with this. Mendonça believes that living the life of a mystic in contemplation is for everyone. That's kind of hard to believe. At least I wouldn't have believed it before I read his book. Let me put it that way. So it is for everyone. So before we get too deep into it, let's open with prayer. You'll find it on your slide. You'll find it up here when I change the slide. There we go. And let's say this prayer together in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. God of graciousness and love, we pause to become aware that you are present within and around each of us. Your loving grace fills us now and strengthens our souls to see what is good and true, beautiful and loving. Help us to allow your powerful presence to fill us and increase our ability to see and hear you. Guide our every action so that we might be earnest in our search for truth and fairness in how we treat those around us. Let your grace fill us now. Amen. All right. All right, so I have a question for you. What does mysticism mean to you? Anybody? What does mysticism mean to you? What comes to mind when you think of that word?
I think of vision. I got a copy in my head.
A vision. Okay. All right. Anybody else? Yes.
Spirituality.
A deep spirituality. Okay. I'm not going to disagree with you. So bring it on. Anybody else?
I think of the marriage of the material and the spiritual.
Marriage of the material and the spiritual. Okay. Good. Good.
An awareness of God everywhere and at all times.
Awareness of God everywhere and all times. You guys should be teaching this. Yeah. Yeah. So do you know any mystics? Yes. Okay.
I think of our dear friend, Father Joachim.
Father Joachim. All right. Very good. We like him contemporary. Thomas Merton. Excellent. Any more? Anybody? Henry Nouwen. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe Ronald Rolheiser.
Possibly. Yeah. Yeah. How about John the Baptist? How about St. Paul?
Yes.
How about the early desert fathers? How about those guys? A lot of them, we know their names, but they're not very common to us in our contemporary study, right? From the 4th century, how about John Chrysostom? And a term, quite frankly, I had not heard, the Desert Mothers. Yeah, I had not heard that. Others would include Hildegard of Bingen, Francis and Clare of Assisi, Anthony of Padua, Bonaventure, Meister Eckhart, Julian of Norwich, Catherine of Siena, Ignatius of Loyola, Meister Eckhart, did I say that? I did. Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, Francis de Sales, Rose of Lima, Teresa of Lisieux. They're not very uncommon, are they? Right? We're getting some pretty common names that are out there.
Teresa of
Lisieux, the little flower. Yes. And not that Father Joachim should be not thought of as contemporary, but how about Thomas Merton? Right? Yeah, that's another one that would be worth noting. Right. So mysticism is not uncommon, right? Oops, I went too far. There we go. Have any of you had a mystical experience? Can you talk about it? Are you willing to talk about it? And it's okay if not.
Yeah, I don't know how to explain it. I was praying and I felt like I wasn't just aware of my hands, I wasn't just aware of my feet, I was aware of all of me, and I was connected to the world, and there was a sense of peace that I'd not been able to experience before.
Okay. Yes.
I had one when I was 11 years old. I was at a friend's house in the country, and it was a very snowy landscape, and the wind was out, and I was climbing over a fence. And as I was climbing over the fence, all of a sudden something just struck me in my soul, and I felt like I could see the whole world, like the whole sky moved, and it's so hard to explain. It's just an awareness of God.
Yeah. I've had a couple, 3. One of them was when I was 12. And we'd been out at the lake all day. It was a Sunday. I don't know, I think we got there around noon. And the weather started to look really eerie. It got extremely hot. The water was as calm and flat as you can imagine. Mom says, we better go. This is not looking very good. There was no cloud in the sky, but she was determined we were going to go. We did. And we were up at Wabas's Lake. We came home down Belmont Road. And just before we got to Belmont, I'm looking off to the west and I can see 6 and 8 fork lightning in jet black clouds off in the distance. We come down a little further and my dad has got his foot on the gas. We're pulling the boat behind us and the car stops. The engine didn't stop. Transmission didn't stop working. The wind blew so hard it stopped the car. And then all of a sudden it let go and we were traveling again. And we looked for some shelter and the Baptist church was having services on Sunday evening. And so we wheeled into the parking lot and I was the oldest. So mom grabbed my sister Karen and my sister Judy. Dad grabbed my brother Dan, and I was on my own. I went back after this experience and I counted the steps to the front to that church. There were 14. I was the last one out of the car. I know I touched the bottom step. I know I landed on the top. I don't know how. I slipped into that church like any kid would through a cracked door, and the door slammed behind me and broke in half vertically. I did a baseball slide under the last pew. My dad reached out for me and pulled me under, and every piece of glass in that church erupted. I don't think I knew it was God's hand at the time. But I since learned he had more for me to do. Right? He had more for me to do. Call it a guardian angel. You can call it whatever you like, but it was God's hand for me. So, yeah, so we have these experiences from time to time. They're not all the same, are they? They're not all the same. So, Mendonca writes, mysticism has concreteness, right? All of the experiences we had are something that has concreteness. Mysticism has concreteness. It is body, experience, place, living tissue. Most of the time, what is missing from the believer's faith is not ideas, not truths. We have those. But corporality, resonance, and weight. Precariousness and fragility of the body, the cry, universal and concrete that springs from it. It's common and daily breathing brings us closer to God more than any conceptual elaboration. This was written on page 28 of his book. Mysticism is rooted in our senses. Mysticism is not then deep thinking, nor is it deep meditation. We'd like to think maybe it is, right? Maybe that's why we avoid it so much. Because we don't know what to think, or we're too distracted. It is deeply present to an encounter. It is being deeply present to an encounter. There we go. So, contemplation is often understood by us common folk to be something for the religious elite. And, we like this deep thinking and stuff. It's not that exactly. I mean, I'm not saying that there isn't reflection part of it. I'm not saying that there isn't some mental exercise in the way, but it's not about that. The key to contemplation is not rational thinking. I was reading up in a different source from about an abbess in a Carmelite abbey who was asked this question. What is the difference between meditation and contemplation? We use both of these words like they're interchangeable. She says, no. She replied, meditation is prayer that is human-led. Contemplation is prayer that is God-led. It's different. It is full and active presence to and appreciation of the other. Who's the other? It might be your grandson. It might be a stranger on the street. It might be the experience of a mother hen and her brood. Simply put, contemplation is to be present to mystery. Can you think, I'd like you to take a minute, can you think of a common human experience that if you were really present to it, right, it reveals mystery? I'm sorry?
No.
Love. Yeah. That's kind of lofty. How about making it concreteness?
A walk in the woods.
A walk in the woods. Yeah. How about a birth? How many of you have been actually in the room when somebody has passed away? Huh? How about marriage? The first day at school. May not be for the kid, but it sure as heck is for mom and dad. Huh? Caring for the sick. A fresh spring day. Right? The first snow. Well, maybe not 24 inches. I don't know. So, mysticism is an attempt to go beyond the mere surface evaluation of the activities of life. Evaluation of what is happening as good or bad. This would be human-led thinking. It is an attempt towards contemplation, active presence and connection to life, to being, relationship with the other, as the means of experiencing meaning and truth that results in a deep connection and a response of the heart. Presence and relationship are the key. And they result in a transforming experience. This is really hard language, folks, because we're not used to doing presence very well, to be honest with you. So he goes on to talk in his 5 chapters about each of the 5 senses. Probably should advance that slide once. What do you think? Right? Touch, smell, taste, hearing, and sight. Mendonça calls us to experience God in a much larger tapestry. These are his words. Why would he use tapestry? Right? Why would he use that word, a much larger tapestry? Tapestry is a tactile object of art, right? That we can experience with our senses. It is the result of intricately woven threads and images that express meaning and connection, right? And I have to tell you, I had an opportunity a number of years ago to go to the great big newspaper guy from the 30s and 40s out of California, Hearst Castle. Thank you. And he ransacked castles from all over Europe, and he built his own castle, so to speak, on the Pacific coast. And hanging on the walls are all these tapestries, and they are amazing as to what they have, what they show, and what they say, and they tell a story without knowing the story, right? So it's all this interwoven stuff. How is our life like a tapestry then? How is our life like a tapestry?
Our actions and reactions make the picture.
Our
Our actions and reactions make the picture.
yeah. But are any one of us our own, only on our own? No, not hardly. Right? Father John Kenny wrote, when he actually came and spoke at Joyce's, my wife Joyce's dad's wake. And he spoke about how the pain of loss when someone dear to us dies is certainly impacted by our own relationship with that individual. But its deepest sense of grief comes from all the other people we know through that person, that are connected to us through this person. It isn't just the loss of this one individual, but it's the loss of a community that stands behind him as well. So our life is like a tapestry, very much so. And that it is through the gift of our five senses that we encounter God in life, creation, and our fellow human beings. So Mendoza points out that in this day and age, we are terribly distracted. Terribly distracted. We substitute Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and how many others, right? Leaving behind the real engagement of relationships. I was in a restaurant the other day, and I overheard a conversation of a mother talking to her friend about her adult daughter. Actually, she said daughters. And she expressed that one of her daughters who worked at home, like as in, not in the office, doing her work at home, as having anxiety with having to actually go and talk with someone face to face. Whoa, right? To resolve an issue. Whoa. What are we doing? What are we doing? We're losing something significant to our own very being in the world through virtual distraction. Too often we look, but we do not see. We hear, but we do not listen. I think one of the most common things that goes on in society today is we don't listen, we don't hear or listen to what's coming at us for the purposes of understanding. We listen so we can respond. We're already making up the words we're going to respond with before the other person has completed the thought. We touch, but we do not feel. We taste and smell, but do not savor. Even that, I hate to think we did Thanksgiving dinner that way, because I really savor Thanksgiving dinner. But during the week, it's hurry up, get a meal so we can get on to the next thing, instead of using that time for a relationship. So Mendonça asks us to deeply pay attention to our senses, right? To anchor us in the present moment, leading us to be present to someone or something that is beyond even our logical understanding. Mendoza writes, quoting Father Joseph Marie Perrin, if contemplation is sacrament. Really? I remember there was only 7 sacraments. But he calls it the 8th sacrament, right? So Mendonça is a cardinal. You got to remember that, right? He knows the catechism. He's theologically trained. He's one of the muckety mucks, right? Yeah, he's a big deal. How can he say that contemplation is a sacrament? What's he trying to communicate to us? Just like at Mass, it is grace-filled. It involves a sign of God's presence, and it is fulfilled only by our conscious and active participation while we're there. And so, rightfully so, he can call this a sacrament. So, this seems like all highfalutin stuff. We ought to probably do a little theology while we're at it. Okay? So, like everything, it all starts with Genesis, right? Those of you who went through my RCIA, there's a few of you, you know this, because we spent some time on that. Chapters 1, 2, and 3 of Genesis tell us more than God created. This is important to understand. More than God created. The first thing to notice is that God speaks creation into existence. That's the first thing to notice. He didn't take something else and make creation. He spoke it into existence. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. "Let the water teem with an abundance of living creatures," and so it happened. The method of creation implies that all creation is of God and not separate from God. This is pretty significant stuff, because how many times do we want to run away from the physical for the spiritual, right? Creation cannot be separated from God any more than I can be separated from my own words. They're still of me. Even if I read the book to figure it out, they're still my words here tonight. Being made in the image of God is also significant. First, our divine qualities are intelligence, the gift of intelligence. The second is freedom, that we are free to choose. And the third is the ability to be in relationship. We are given the responsibility as well to be fertile and to be a loving caretaker of creation. This too is part of our responsibility. So this is all about connectedness and relationship. That's what we're talking about here. That's what Mendonça wants us to understand. That contemplation is about relationship, about connectedness. God's perspective, well, let me say this. And God looked at all that he had created, and he found it very good. Do we believe that? No, really. Is that our experience? What do you think? Anybody?
Oops.
Yeah, God created was very good, but humans have kind of messed things up.
Oh.
I mean, there's a lot of good, but then there's a lot of evil. Not to be negative, I mean, it seems we always have hope, not to get preaching, but with some of the challenges that we have in life.
So we surprised God.
Well, that's
We surprised God because we're the ones that made it evil.
Well, I mean, the goodness is still there. I mean, even if it's not gone as it might have, it's still there. We can't
it is still
destroy it.
there. Exactly. The goodness is still there. Right. Yeah. Right. I think God knew that we were going to screw it up. That's what I think. And still, he stood right there and he said, "This is very good." Yeah. It's something to really grab a hold of here. God's perspective is evaluation and celebration and not judgment. This is significant. The mayfly that lives its adulthood in one night is good. The mosquito that sucks the blood out of mammals is good because its life feeds bats and fish and all kinds of other things. But how many of you at one point in time in your life have not said that mosquitoes are evil? Right? Yeah, really, right? A human who lives for 8 or 10 decades is good. And so is the baby who only lives a few hours. Yeah. So how do we how do you and I, how do we as humans encounter the works of creation? Right? So I want you to think about this. When you experience a shoe, you're going to buy a shoe, ladies, a meal, or some portion of it, an event, a person you do not know yet. How do you encounter these things? What is your process? What are your thoughts? On what basis do you see them? What is your initial approach? What are you doing when you come across these new things? Anyone?
have to try the shoe on and depends how much it costs.
So what are you doing? You're trying it on to find out what?
It's no big deal.
Or it hurts,
It's comfortable.
right? Yeah. So who's that got to be good for? Oh, there's the problem in contemplation. There's the problem. Our judgment is always going to be from my perspective, for me, the person I meet. Do I like them? Do I not like them? The spaghetti that Joyce's sister made with lima beans, not so much. Right? So our judgment is from our perspective. This is different than what chapter 1 of Genesis tells us about God's perspective. This is different. Chapter 3 helps us to understand this, says Mendonça. We find Eve saw the tree of knowledge of good and evil, was good for food and pleasing to the eyes, to her eyes, and the tree was desirable for gaining wisdom, right? Was this not her evaluation in chapter 3? Yes?
No, I'm going through here and her face looks familiar.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it. Okay. So Mendonça writes, Eve's understanding of relationship was how was it good for her? How was it good for her? Obscuring her vision of the goodness of being. We do this all the time. We walk across the field in the middle of summer and we don't want to sweat. But sweat is cooling us. How does that compare to God's view expressed in the creation stories? It's different. God's view is not about judgment, but with all life and struggles, God is present to its wholeness. Okay. St. Paul also has something to say here too. He's talking to the Athenians about the unknown God. And he says, the God who made the world and all that it is in it, the Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in sanctuaries made by human hands. Rather, it is he who gives to everyone life and breath and everything. He made from one the whole human race to dwell on the entire surface of the earth so that people might seek him, perhaps grope for him, struggle, and find him, though indeed he is not very far from any of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. Creation, according to St. Paul, creation according to Genesis, is not separate from God. Nor is it separate from us. Yes, Ray.
Could I just clarify here when he says he made from one the whole human race? Is that essentially saying he made from himself the whole human race?
Well,
what is the
St. Paul doesn't really talk about that very much. Okay. It could be interpreted, I think, a couple of different ways, but certainly one would be that he made Adam. Okay. I mean, depending on chapter 1 or chapter 2, you could see that happening in different ways, but chapter 1 is clearly one human being, right? Yeah. But also, God is one, right? And it's all of God. So there's different ways of looking at this, I think. We hear at the last line of the slide these words from preface number 4 at Mass. So this is not something we don't hear on a somewhat regular basis. right? In him we live and move and have our being. So what are the implications of what Paul is telling us? If this is true, then where and how are we sure to encounter God? In creation.
In the present moment.
In the present moment. Certainly it is with our senses and our experience of creation by being present to it, right? Being present to it. Don't go for a walk and just blow by them flowers. Stop for a second. Take a peek. It's an awareness. Absolutely. It is awareness. Yeah. Letting it in by being present without judgment and caring for it as God cares for us. Yet, oh, that's nice when I take. Oh no, I got the right one. So Carl Jung and Albert Einstein, do you know these people? Both of them? No, well, not personally. Okay, that's good. Yeah. We would certainly think of them as considered to be deep thinkers, would you say? Yeah. So they ask this question. Are we related to something infinite or not? I think neither one of them are approaching this from a religious perspective, but they are asking this very deep question, right? Richard Rohr, how many of you know Richard Rohr? Almost everybody? Almost, yeah, a few people. Okay, good. He's a Franciscan, if you don't know, Franciscan priest, contemporary writer. And he asks, are we part of an enchanted universe, or are we trapped in our own little desperate search for meaning? What do you think he means by enchanted? Enchanted in the sense that there are forces and beings that our human logic cannot explain. How about that? Yeah. Mystery. Yeah, thank you. Excellent.
Carl Jung said, I don't believe in God, I know God.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And how do we know God? In our bones and in our experiences. Yeah. So Rohr also says, in fact, we cannot know the full meaning of our life until we see that we are a little strand of a much larger tapestry. Here again comes that word tapestry, right? We do not routinely see ourselves as being made in the image of God. I don't know about you, but I don't. Well, routinely might be a strong word. And that we are part of a universe of God's creation in which we live and breathe and have our being, then how can we possibly see, if we don't believe these things, if we don't understand these things, how can we possibly see that any of it is an experience of God? Think about that. If we don't have any of this in us, how can we come to see God? And of God's very personal and universal revelation. God's living gift, or we living God's gift of our being made in the image of God, provides us with the ability to be in sacred relationship. And this relationship is not for me as much as I'd like to see it. but it's for the benefit of the other, whoever that is and whatever that is. This relationship must include both vertical dimension with God and a horizontal dimension with all of humanity. And I dare say creation too. Creation too. So a life of mysticism and contemplation is simple. It really is simple, but it's not very easy. Chopping wood is simple, but it's not very easy. Yeah.
Right.
Right? One must see instead of look. Listen instead of hear. Feel instead of touch. Savor instead of taste and smell.
I think it's so simple that you can't understand it. You can only do it.
I think that's right, Greg. I think that's right. So this is what mystics have been talking about throughout history. The Desert Fathers would speak of living a life of contemplation. Not just taking 5 minutes out on Saturday morning because I don't have to go to work. Living a life of contemplation. This is so simple and so easy, as Greg says. All we need to do is exactly what we routinely do not do. And there it is. So Mendonca's book leads us through each of our senses to experience God in a much larger tapestry. Through deep presence to creation and our interactions with others as the means of experiencing God's presence and grace. So I'm going to stop for a second and I want to hear from you guys. What do you hear? What do you think I'm crazy about? What do you think, or he's about? What strikes resonance with you? What do you find comforting? Or not?
Give the introverts 30 seconds.
Hmm?
Let's give the introverts 30 seconds.
Okay.
Well, we'll start in the room here, and this is the point where I'll move the camera around so people online can also interact with us. And then we'll take a few folks online as well.
Yeah.
Who would like to share.
Thoughts? New stuff? Not new stuff?
Again, for me, it's trying to have that awareness to be aware that God is there with me, holding my hand.
Yeah.
And leading me through life.
Yeah. And engaging you in every experience.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Then what?
Then what?
Yeah, then what?
Just go with the flow.
In a way, but to be conscious of God's presence leads us to God-led prayer, contemplation.
Sorry, I took that for granted.
I get it. But it's important to say it
Say
that
it out.
way, right?
Right.
Because I had conversations with a couple of folks this weekend who caught me at Mass, and they wanted to know the difference between meditation and contemplation. God-led, human-led. Yeah.
If you're talking about the great mystics and their experience of God in this larger tapestry, then it always gets a little bit frustrating because what they communicated about that experience comes off a little bit obscure to me. And I can't quite get from them how they are experiencing God as Trinity, because I'm not sure they communicate God in a Trinitarian way. Can you refute that, or do you think some of them do
No,
communicate God?
I'll repeat this a little later, but I forgot who I read this through. It might have been in Mendonca's book, but he talks, whoever it was, talks about the desert fathers, right? The earliest folks of deep faith. They did not, I think it's in one of your handouts, that's what it is. They did not have a doctrine yet. They didn't have a mysterium, right? To take a look at what are the things we believe and what we don't. They had an experience. They had a way of life. Their way of life was contemplation. And so oftentimes we see little anecdotes, right? About, the teacher and the student, and the student is going, ah. And the teacher is saying, it's everywhere. It's in everything. It's go do your thing. Just go and pray while you're working and while you're doing your stuff. Connect, be conscious, be aware, and God will lead your prayer.
The answer to my question that I'm getting is that the Desert Fathers didn't necessarily have an experience of God that was Trinitarian.
They may not. They may not.
That's fine.
I mean, certainly a good number of them, not all of them, but a good number of them were Jewish, right? Jews didn't have that sense of a Trinitarian God, but they knew something was up because they had this Jesus guy, God. And then they had Jesus praying to the Father. Something was up.
Well, God is Trinity. God is also one.
Absolutely. Absolutely true. Somebody else?
Yeah.
I, in my mind's eye, for the Trinity, it's different ways that God has empathy for us. Through our humanity, through the Spirit that moves us, through the God the Father. What like when I think about this conversation, it seems I'm a psychologist, so I think about consciousness and thinking and different levels of consciousness. But it has to be that the Desert Fathers had a sense of tenderness with each other and a sense of love with each other that wasn't explained. Like I think about that Latin verse, ubi caritas, is where there's mercy, there's God.
Mhm.
And that's the piece that's a threshold for me, is not did I have a body-mind experience, is how could I imagine tenderness that doesn't come from me? How am I in an experience of tenderness? Like, I don't think Thomas Merton's work would impress me if I didn't also sense an intimacy and a tenderness and a mercy that didn't come from him originally, right?
Right.
It's not that he had the best, most loving parents and he just happened to be this super nurturing guy. He happened upon an experience of God that led him to be very tender.
I had 3 choices for mystical contemplative experience. One of them was with my son. My son was 17 and he was on the football team. He was the king of campus. He had the job of his dreams. He worked in an outdoor sporting goods store. He loved every minute of it. And yet he figured out, you know, my station is right next to the back door. And he convinced himself that he could take back then this little tiny handheld GPS unit and toss it out the back door to his buddy. And his buddy could take it around the front, return it for cash.
Yeah.
A lot of money back then. Thank God he got caught. And he got charged. And he was so embarrassed, horrified, embarrassed. He couldn't talk to me about it. And so he wrote a letter while Joyce and I were gone one evening for dinner with friends. And when we came back, the letter was laying on the counter. And we picked it up and I read it. I don't know. Maybe it's just dads. So the gals maybe don't have these kinds of thoughts. But the thoughts that run through your head, you can imagine, range from rage to emotional collapse. How could he do this? Why did he do it? How stupid is this? Et cetera, et cetera. And so I read the letter and I sat down and he comes in the door. And I can't tell you why I did this. I don't have words for it. All I can tell you is that he walks in the door, takes 2 steps into the kitchen. I take 2 steps towards him and I put my arms around him. And I said, Pat, I can't fix this for you. But I can walk with you. I don't know. I don't have any other words for that. I don't know how, I mean, to this day, it strikes up great emotion for me. I mean, I got to tell you, there have been other times when he did something, I kicked his butt all the way upstairs. And this one, I looked at him. It's like the prodigal son, right? It's the same story. Yeah. Yes.
It seems to me like mysticism is a real experience that happens. What happened to you, it happened to me in other ways, but very strong ways. But that it doesn't involve so much theology and all that, although I like theology. But the mystic part of it is when you just encounter God and you don't understand it.
Yeah.
For me, I was standing over a bunch of bodies and I was going to get shot.
Yeah.
And it was, it was very real. And I experienced God with me.
Yeah.
And that's all of 40-some years. I still can't talk about it.
Yeah.
In a way that's, not emotional.
Right.
But God was with me then.
Yeah.
That afternoon.
Yeah.
And he continues to be with me. But, why and how that happened, I know we kind of took it all apart. That was in Guatemala.
when they had a dictator and it was a mess. But I guess what I'm thinking that to me is not a theological experience, or it's just almost a purely emotional experience, and that's what I see. That's what I see. This mysticism really is that is kind of emotion.
But what it is, what you just described, what is important there is the intense connection you made to the experience, right? The awareness, right? The participation, whether you wanted to or not, it wasn't a choice in that case, right? But you participated in it. Yeah. This is what he's talking about. Participation in relationship, awareness of what's going on around you. Deep, deep awareness.
Do we have anybody online?
Why don't you take a look for us, Mark? Huh?
Is there anyone online that would like to ask
Chime in?
ask a question or make a comment?
I would maybe, my name's Irene. Thanks for letting me join virtually. And thanks for this material. It's really beautiful. I'm going to buy the book tonight. So a lot of my work, I'm also a psychologist, and a lot of my work has to do with mindfulness, which is part of why I tuned in this evening. And mindfulness meditation has so much overlap with what you're sharing, and it's really kind of exciting to see how this lines up. I think one of the fascinating things for me about mindfulness practice, which is really paying attention to the present moment without judgment, that's the definition of it. Neurologically, it's a powerful tool, even when you don't bring God into it consciously, which I think is a really beautiful gift of God, that he sort of created this. He's filled his world with so much goodness. Then when we actually pay attention to it, it's healing for us. And I think of it kind of like walking in nature or other forms of self-care that we engage in. God shows up when we take care of ourselves, whether we acknowledge that he's present or not. And so then when you add in the awareness that God is with us as we pay attention, it's just all that much more powerful. So I think this framework that you're sharing with us is really, really helpful. And I just want to say thanks for bringing it to us.
Thank Cardinal Mendonça. Yeah. Anybody else? Got anybody else from online? All right. Well, I'm going to switch gears. Shall we try to participate in a couple of exercises? Huh? Shall we try that?
Sure.
There we go. All right. Thank you, Mark. So I'd love to take you through a lot of examples, right? As Mendonça does. Unfortunately, we don't have time for all of that. So we do have some. So I have selected a couple of real life situations to see if we can experience this mysticism of the present moment. So the first one I want to talk about is Teresa of Lisieux, right? The little flower. Now, I don't know if you know this, but she died at the age of 24. She was very young, and yet she was declared a doctor of the church, right? Not formally educated in any way, shape, or form. So, so this is a picture of Saint Teresa of Lisieux, right over here. It was the last picture taken of her. And this story is about this picture being taken. So in June, before she died, while living in the Carmelite convent, she was quite ill. The sisters knew that she would not be with them long, and they wanted a photograph of her. And so they set it up to take it in the garden area outside of the chapel. Therese was exhausted from her illness, but got dressed in her habit and went out to have her picture taken. After the photo session, she stayed out in the garden. She observed a mother hen with her brood, and it brought her to tears. And there's an image of that. A short time later, Mother Agnes passed by and found Therese weeping. Agnes inquired as to what was troubling Therese, and Therese just pointed to the hen and the chicks. And she said that she was weeping with gratitude and joy because of the way the chicks were sheltered under their mother's wings, was how God had sheltered her entire life. Right? And I get it. The first time I read through it too, I went, yeah, I kind of get this, right? But look at the life that her little short life, look at the trials and the struggles and all that went on. And here she makes this connection between this very common image, right? Something she probably seen regularly. And on this day, fully aware, she connects it with her life that is soon to be ending. Yeah. Therese was present to what was going on around her and looked deeply into her experience of this common and simple scene. This is what contemplation is. It's not phenomenally fantastic all the time, but it is being aware that every moment and every way we are connected to God. Okay, you have a piece of paper like this. Okay, I'd like you to pull it out. And we're going to try one of these experiences ourselves. So we're new. So we need to gather our thoughts. We need to gather ourselves around this. I'd like you to yourself, say a quiet prayer to the Holy Spirit, asking her to reveal God's presence in the world and in your own life. And without evaluation, take 5 minutes and just observe this picture. This is a great-grandfather with his newborn great-grandson. That's all you get to know about it. Say your prayer, and then jot down whatever crosses your mind. Maybe not a sentence, just a feeling, just an image. Maybe you've had this experience. And we'll give ourselves 5 minutes to do this. Look at that picture. All right. So what do you got to say? Anybody?
May I ask you a question? Is that your grandfather?
That's my grandfather. And it's my son, Pat.
It's not, I just, well, I just put words that I want to, talk with everybody. I have love, tenderness, life, shelter, youth, wisdom, and comfort.
How's that make a connection for you?
Well, it's a heartwarming picture. In a way, you could see your grandfather as God, in a way. You always see God through the people in our lives. And it's just it's a beautiful picture.
Mhm. Yeah.
It brought me to mind the way your grandfather's holding the child as God holding us in the palm of his hand. And
Yeah.
that really moved me.
Yeah.
Because I've been thinking a lot about that this week.
Yeah.
Seeing how
Did you notice this?
It's like pure joy and delight
yeah.
on the part of your grandfather. And as I was thinking about this, I see that love just emanates all around this picture. But then I started thinking about the baby's perspective. And you know how babies are. I mean, probably the next moment he was screaming. He just don't know. But in that moment,
the child is like completely and utterly trusting and content in your grandfather's arms. And it's almost like, Christ said we have to be like children.
Mhm.
There you go.
Right. Else?
Or anyone online?
The thought that came to me was the relationality of our whole world. So just seeing the power of the relationship here in this simple moment. With the quiet, I was starting to hear sounds around me in the space I'm in too, and cars going by and other people in the house, and just it enhanced this feeling I have of being connected to the world and connected to God as I saw this visual image of connection and relationship here.
Yes.
It's like that picture on St. Teresa's chicken in the hand. That's what I saw.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not very different, is it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was thinking that the baby is simply aware, really has no thoughts, isn't really even capable of thoughts, and seeing your grandfather is kind of having the same experience, awareness without thought. Just appreciation.
Anybody else?
I noticed the hands, is your grandfather's hands holding their hands. I know what that is, to make sure that you stabilize yourself as you hold the baby, and it made me feel like God is human. God understands that vulnerability as much as he's loving. He also has to bolster his hands.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's see. Mendonca leads us with this reflection from chapter 1. Life with a capital L, life worthy of its name, is nothing more than an act of hope. Think about that. Look at the hope that was in that picture. This man who is now at that time fully retired. He was probably in his mid 70s by then. Actually probably upper 70s. He was a carpenter. And he's looking down at his great grandson and wondering what will become of this one. It's an act of hope. Without hope, we can only see the raw appearance and nothing more. It is hope that lets us see what could be, that shows beyond the harsh present conditions, the wealth of possibilities still hidden. Hope dialogues with the future and brings it closer. Our existence from start to finish is a profession of faith in hope. In hope. What would our lives look like without hope? What would it look like?
Not good.
Not good.
Always in a hole.
Yeah.
Depressing, bro.
Yeah. Really. And yet we hardly, I mean, I'm not faulting you in any way, shape, or form, any of you who spoke up, but no one spoke of hope in that picture, right? What I'm saying is fully conscious, fully aware, right? Fully aware. Hope.
I'm sorry that word didn't pop in my head.
Well, I know. Don't be sorry.
It should have.
Don't be sorry. You're no better or worse than me. Right? Our hope is based on our faith.
Yeah, when I read I almost got through the whole book, but when I read that particular quote, I was struck by how essential hope is to anything we do.
Yes. We hardly give hope a thought until we go to a funeral, right? We go to a funeral and we've got hope that the person who has passed away is in God's embrace, right? Yeah. Our hope is based in our faith. It is a faith in God who loves and cares for us here in this life and calls us to be with him in the next. Hope is not separate from faith. It is sure knowledge of what is to come based upon faith, the knowledge held in the present moment. Yeah. Mendonça continues to point out, it is important to consider that just as at the time of creation itself, life is a gift. We have received the most precious good, existence, without ever doing anything to earn it. We would be good to consider that we are the result of the efforts and gifts we receive from others. And he quotes the poet Adelia Lopez, I am the work of others. Our lives have meaning and value that we do not create, but only receive. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think I have another one. Let me see here. Do you want me to wrap this up right away, Mark, or can I go for a little bit?
Go on, please.
Okay. Let's try this again. All right. Same exercise. You can grab the back side of the paper if you like. And here is the image or images. It's a plethora of images that all speak about something similar. This is a collage of pictures that I took a couple years ago. You might pick only one or see all of them as one. The pictures hardly do justice to the experience. So you might, for this exercise, let them connect you to your own personal experience and go with that. So just a few minutes. Okay. Most people are looking up already. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I'm sorry, I mean this. Well, no, see, where were you taken, may I ask?
Oh, let's see.
Not that it's a near
Canadian national parks in Alberta. There. That one was taken in Olympic National Park,
where's that?
Portland, or in Oregon. Yeah, Oregon.
Seriously,
I'm sorry, Washington. You're right.
I'm sorry. I put God and duty of God in nature, life, and light versus darkness.
Okay.
Kind of just things that popped in my head.
Okay. Anybody? Yeah.
Well, personally, I mean, I love nature. That's where I find my peace and my tranquility, and that's where I get grounded. But the guy over there, that guy, he's not having a good time. He's in pain. Life is hard. Is he finding that peace and tranquility? Or is he seeing himself more like one of those, oh, that tree looked to me like it was cut off at the stump. Now I see that's not what it is. But nevertheless, life is hard for him. He can't hardly walk through there. What has that got to do with the rest of it?
See, I had a different,
Those are my thoughts.
It's my reflection. You see what I mean? Right. And how does that connect us? Right? How does this man's endurance, right, with what's going on for him in life?
I felt that trees represented his strength.
Ah, okay,
I had strength written down.
okay. Did
I
anybody?
was drawn to him too. He really stood out to me. I feel like he's a part of nature, and the other people in the other photos are apart from nature. It's just something about him and the trees that really works together.
Okay.
Broad man walking in big tall trees.
Anybody see death?
Yeah, well, death is
Yeah.
in nature.
Yeah. All of these plants are living on death.
True.
Huh? And and at least in the United States, this is my opinion, so take it with a grain of salt, but we see death as an evil. We really do. As a society, we see death as an evil.
I see all of that as renewal,
I do too.
renewal
Yeah.
instead of death. I mean, there were dead branches there, but there was growth coming out of it. Renewal,
Exactly.
refreshing yourself.
Well,
And-
we
Go ahead, Greg.
we hide death. We hide it away. We don't. It doesn't have a public place in this culture.
What did he say? I'm sorry.
That death doesn't have a public place in this culture.
We hide it.
We do. Yeah. It saddens me greatly as to how few funerals we do compared to when I was a kid. So, yes, ma'am.
As a hospice, yes, they're very, very kind.
Yeah.
Or alone.
Or alone.
There's a man
Yeah.
who had no one.
Yeah.
So that's that.
Yeah.
Very nice.
You gave me a great lead in, because the next event, did you take it away from me again, Mark? Yeah, right. I'd like you to take this one home and do this one at home. Right? How do you find God in that? Leave it at that. I'm also not going to speak about this one. This is Thomas Merton. And if you don't know the story with Thomas Merton, I'm going to suggest you just Google 4th and Walnut Thomas Merton. You'll get the story. You'll find out what's going on. Okay. But he had a very significant awakening standing in the downtown area of Louisville, Kentucky. And this is the corner. Okay. All right. Closing remarks here.
Excuse me, Fred, you do have a little bit about Thomas Merton.
I do. I do. You can read that.
Yeah.
So you went one too far, or I went one too far. Nope. I stand corrected. All right. So closing thoughts from Cardinal Mendonça. The key to understanding mysticism, and in particular, a mysticism of the present moment, is the word relationship. We are all made in the image and likeness of God. The relationship is therefore both vertical and horizontal. It takes us away from loneliness. It takes us away from self-sufficiency. None of us is of our own origin. We cannot create ourselves, neither in our beginning, nor in our present, nor in the future. We'd like to think so. We like to think we create ourselves, at least in some part, but we are created by God through the love of parents. We are the product of the generations before us. For me, I am the 4th generation of electricians and contractors. I have generations of Scandinavian and German ancestors. On my mother's side, I am Catholic. On my father's side, I am Protestant. My values and even how I think of myself and God is anchored in this rich history. We can't escape it. I might like to think that I chose to go to college and chose my path of owning my own electrical related company. I might like to think that how I raised my kids and loved my wife was my doing. But really? I carry with me, to remind me of that, this pocket knife. It was my grandfather's, whom you saw the picture. And I carry it because on Saturday evenings, Joyce and I would go over to Grandma and Grandpa's house, and in the summertime, he and I would sit out on the back driveway, and he would whittle, and we would talk. Yeah. The mystical experience God passes on from the 3rd to the 2nd person. God ceases to be he, she, this, and becomes for us a you. God acquires a face, a splendor of a person. Mendonça continues, mysticism is practiced only by way of the body, a body that sees, savors, touches, listens, opening us up like a window to transcendence, to the experience of God, within whom we live and move and have our being. Yeah. So last questions, last thoughts. What are you going to do with this? What can you do with it?
I know I'm gonna buy the book.
Yeah. Buy the book and read it with somebody. Don't read it alone. Maybe it's by Paulus Press. Yeah. Yeah, Ray.
God acquires a face, the splendor of a person. I like to think that on some level, for most persons, God, in the form of Jesus, has had a face all through our upbringing as Christians. And there's obviously that connection with Christianity.
Of course.
Is he moving towards something else that
No.
anybody could have the face of Christ and therefore reflect God?
Well, Ray, when we're at Mass, we gather as the body of Christ. Yeah, let's think about that for just a second, right? That's significant. But too often I think we move in this pendulum from the divinity of Christ to the humanity of Christ, right? And when we move that pendulum too far to divinity, we lose the face of Christ. Huh?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, it doesn't sound good.
It doesn't sound good, but it's important, right? And so we have other means because we live and move and have our being in God. Yeah.
Fred, thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
We need the camera.
Yeah.
And thank you for joining us this evening. So glad that the technology that we have can allow us to interact, not only here with one another, but from anywhere. And just want to remind everyone, a quick reminder that events like these aren't possible without contributions and donations from our friends and associates. And so we're very grateful for your support and the support of our friends and associates here. We do hope that you will join us next Tuesday. We are offering an Advent evening of reflection. It's a little bit longer. It starts at 6:30 till 8:30. The featured speaker is the artist here in the exhibit. And all through, we invite you, for those of you here, to just before you leave, just take a moment to contemplate the artwork that is on exhibit here in the Information Center. The theme is From Grieving to Joy. And the artist himself is going to be sharing stories of that. And it will be an opportunity also for ecumenical dialogue. We're working with, this event is co-sponsored with Bethlehem Lutheran, St. Mark's Episcopal, Westminster Presbyterian, and it's also sponsored by the Kaufman Interfaith Institute. To all of those partners, we're very grateful to be able to work with them together with our Cathedral of Saint Andrew to be able to offer next Tuesday. The artist will be doing, for those gathering in person, the artist will be doing a short tour as well and explaining some of his artwork an hour ahead of time. So you're welcome to come at 5:30 for that. We hope well, I'll leave with, Fred, you reminded me of my own Advent practice one year and invite all of you. The one way to do some further contemplation, one of my practices had been to see everyone as the image of God, as you were sharing, Fred. But the way I reminded myself was the greeting that Gabriel used when he made the Annunciation to Mary. And so in my mind, sometimes out loud to people, I would say, "Hail, highly favored, holy and beloved." And so invite you to find your own Advent practice of this contemplation, this mysticism in the present moment. And thanks again for all of you being here this evening. Have a good night.
All right.
Thank you, Fred.
Good night.